show today Dr. Katherine Hayhoe, an atmospheric scientist and a political scientist, interesting combination, working on climate change and issues of faith. So we're really excited to have her today and hear what she has to talk about. She's working on a PBS series, she has several books, and a part of her work is faith, as I mentioned. So Katherine, welcome. We're so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And we're speaking to you from Texas, I believe.
That's right.
So tell us about your work and the combination of looking at climate issues and faith.
Well, as an atmospheric scientist, my work focuses on what climate change means to us at the local scale where we live. So I spend a lot of time studying what climate change means for our health, our food, our water, our economy. And I've also started to spend a lot of time talking to people about it because I happen to live in a part of the country where the majority of people don't think climate change is real. And if they do think it's real, they don't see what it has to do with them. So getting out talking to people, I soon began to realize that just telling people facts and information was not enough. We have to connect all of the science that we have up here to what's really in our hearts. And for many of us, for about 75% of people across the United States who would call themselves Christian, a great deal of what is in our hearts has to do with our faith. And so I realized that as a Christian myself, I had a unique opportunity to speak out on this issue of climate change, not just with all the data and the facts and the information, which is important, but also connecting all of that to the values that people already have.
And are you finding that effective? Are people hearing you?
It is much more effective because there are these myths that we believe. Myths like, oh, well, climate change only matters to the polar bears. Or climate change is a liberal tree hugging thing. I can't care about it if I'm a conservative or if I live in Texas. So the only way to bust those myths, so to speak, is to show how climate change does matter to us and how we already have the values that we need to care about climate change. We don't have to be a different person. Who we are is the perfect person to care.
So you are part of a church in Texas, and I believe your husband is the minister there. Do you articulate these issues in church?
Well, certainly whenever anybody asks. At our church, most of the sermons deal with, specific verses from the Bible. But we get so many questions, and in fact, my husband gets even more questions from people than I do, to the extent that we eventually decided we should write a book together. Because there's many great books out there about climate change, but there's no book that starts in the place where all the people around us are asking the questions. Everything from, it snowed today, how can global warming be real?
Right.
To, how can I agree with this issue when I've been told that it's a liberal issue and I'm not liberal?
And how do you answer that question? Because it seems like it's very politicized in this country. I know you talk about that in other places, you mentioned in Canada, in your work, that it's not a political question, right? And Christianity is not necessarily politicized. But in this country, Christianity is most of the time aligned with extreme right views, which often goes with climate denial.
Exactly. That's what we see here in the United States over the past 3 or 4 years. Climate change has become one of the most politicized issues in the entire country, beating out gun control and abortion and things like that, if you can believe it. But as my husband says, a thermometer is not Democrat or Republican. So, gravity is real. If you step off the cliff, you're going down no matter whether you believe in it or not. So it's not an issue of belief. It's an issue of looking at what the world is telling us and then saying, what does that mean? And what are appropriate responses that are consistent with the values I already have? And if we take people along that journey with us, as I've done many times, we can get to the same place together where we're all asking the question, what can we do that is compatible with the things and the values that we already care about?
That's fantastic. So I know you were at the Paris climate talks. Did you address this there?
That was one of the topics that I addressed there. I had a wonderful one-day workshop with the head of the World Evangelical Alliance, Bishop Ephraim Tindero. He was an official member of the Philippine delegation. That's how seriously many countries take not only the issue of climate change, but the issue of the faith community and their role in helping us to prepare for a changing climate and to provide us with the motivation we need. So I participated in this amazing event with evangelicals from all over the world, all concerned about climate change, all speaking out about how we need urgent action, not just from a scientific perspective, but from a moral perspective, because it's the right thing to do, because people are being harmed by it already today.
And do you feel like American evangelicals are coming to the table? Are they beginning to hear this message that you are talking about?
Well, one of my favorite group of researchers at Yale University do a lot of public opinion polling. And so they measured what they call the Pope effect. So, looking at the Pope's encyclical, which came out last June,
Right.
which was a document that states in very clear terms the basic Christian theology around caring for creation and caring for people, especially the poor, they looked at whether it made a difference. And it turned out in the United States, among Christians all the way from evangelicals to mainline Protestant to Catholic, there was a measurable change in people's opinions about climate change after the encyclical came out.
That's extraordinary. Well, it's very exciting, and it's really important that he's staying on top of that and keeps speaking about it and writing about it. So I want to ask you, if you could just frame for our audience what's happening right now with climate change. You're a scientist, tell us.
That's what I do. So for a long time, we thought of climate change as this distant issue. We thought of it as something that's going to affect our children, but not us, or something that's affecting the polar bears up in the Arctic, but not us down here where we live. Today, though, we know that climate change is here and climate change is now. We are already seeing its impacts on the insurance rates that we pay to hold off our flooding in the Midwest or the Northeast. We're seeing its impacts on stronger hurricanes in the Gulf and typhoons across the Pacific. We're seeing that our droughts are getting longer and stronger. Our heat waves are getting more intense. It's actually having economic impacts on us today. So it is no longer this distant issue. It's an issue that's here now. And the reason why 195 countries went to Paris this December to agree to limit warming to at least 2 degrees and possibly even 1.5 degrees Celsius, if we can, is because all of those 195 countries realized that not doing something about climate change will be more expensive than fixing it.
And do you feel we're getting there? Do you feel the changes will come?
We are changing. If you look around Texas, you see more and more wind energy being installed every month. If you look at how our economy is changing, there is more renewable energy built last year and the year before than coal, gas, and oil put together. So yes, things are changing. We are on our way to transition to a clean energy economy. China is shutting down its coal plants and instituting a cap and trade program on carbon dioxide. India is replacing all of their streetlights with LEDs. We're seeing these changes around the world. The only question from a scientific perspective right now is it happening fast enough to avoid dangerous change? And the answer is, it is not yet happening fast enough. It has to happen faster.
And how do we do that?
That's a great question. And as a scientist, we can only really say this is how much we need to reduce our emissions to avoid certain impacts. But as a human, which most of us are, we can all have our opinions. And as a human, I think that one of the most sensible things that we can do is put a price on carbon that reflects the real costs. So that when you and I make a decision to buy a new car, or to replace an appliance, or to look at how much electricity we use in our home, we have the real information on how much that energy use really is costing us. And if we had a price on carbon, then all of a sudden the economics of renewables, which are already very attractive, the economics would look even more attractive. And that way too, we wouldn't have to pick winners and losers. The market would do it for us.
So you're talking about putting a price on carbon that individuals will actually see.
Yes. They've done it in British Columbia, Canada, since 2007. And what they did is very important. They had a revenue neutral carbon tax. So what that means is, with the carbon tax collected, they reduce people's personal income taxes. So in other words, we actually have more control over how much tax we pay through our buying choices, and then we get money back in their case, their provincial taxes. In our case, it would be our state or federal taxes.
That sounds really good to me.
I know it sounds good to me too. And what I love is I'm on the scientific advisory board for Citizens Climate Lobby, which I love because they're this true grassroots bipartisan organization. They have support from people from the left and the right and the center. And their whole idea is, let's not have all these extra policies. Let's not let the government have to try to pick winners and losers. Let's just put the right price on carbon, the price we know we're already paying, but we're paying it invisibly through our taxes where you and I can't make good decisions about it. Let's put that real price on carbon and let the chips fall where they may.
That's really clever. And that gives people the opportunity to do solar or do geothermal or reduce their usage, however they want to do it, and really make a difference.
And it gives them the freedom to not. If they don't want to, they don't have to. But they will be paying the true cost because, believe it or not, accept it or not, climate change is impacting us financially already.
That's extraordinary. I love that. That's a really, really great campaign. So tell us about the film project you have that will be on PBS.
Sure. So together with our local West Texas PBS station, KTTZ, they came up with the idea of producing a digital short series. PBS has all these digital short series, and they thought, wouldn't it be unique to have a series on climate change coming from West Texas, where most people don't think climate change is real, and where climate change is seen as such a political issue that, you would talk about money and you talk about religion before you talk about climate change at the Thanksgiving dinner table.
That's interesting. So, because I think of it as sort of the oil capital, lots of fracking, why would people even want to hear about it in Texas? So I'm sure that'll be fascinating. How does that group respond to these issues that you're raising? And there's a lot of money in it in Texas, right?
Yes, there is. And that's why when I first moved here, which was 9 years ago now, I was kind of scared. I didn't know how it was going to go. I mean, I was moving into a public university, so I assumed, well, they know I'm a climate scientist.
Right.
I assume I can do my research here. But within about 2 months of moving to West Texas, I got my first invitation to speak to a women's group. And I didn't know what to expect, but I try everything once. So I showed up, and I would say most of the people in the group probably didn't really think climate change was real or a big deal, but everybody was very curious. And that's what I found. Nowadays, I go and I speak to community groups almost on a weekly basis around here. Today, I'm actually giving 3 talks to different community groups. And wherever I go, people are definitely skeptical, but they're curious. And they have a lot of good questions. And if we can really make sense of this issue and, again, connect it to the values people already have, then there's a lot of progress and we can really move forward together. And I've seen that happen again and again.
That's so exciting. So we just have a few minutes left, and I have a question to ask you because it's a personal area that I work on a lot. You've mentioned women a few times, and obviously you're a woman and you're a woman in science. So that's a fairly unique thing. I mean, it's new to our generation, right? It's not something that women were able to get into very easily 50 years ago. So you're a prominent scientist, you're a woman, and it seems like it's women who are calling on you a lot to speak. Could you talk a little bit about gender and how that plays in here?
The interesting thing is that women are disproportionately impacted by climate change. Because climate change disproportionately affects those who lack access to resources. And when you look in developing countries especially, women are often those who are bearing the brunt of the impact, who are trying to support their family, trying to find food or clean water for their children, caring for their children when they become ill. All of the issues, poverty, hunger, malnutrition, lack of access to clean water, health issues, all issues that are being exacerbated by climate change. In the same way, though, I really believe we need women's voices in the solutions. Because study after study has shown that when we get people from a broad diversity of perspectives and viewpoints, when we have women and men in the room together, we often end up with more creative solutions, bigger picture solutions, more robust solutions than when solutions are dreamt up by smaller groups of people that are much more homogeneous. So I think that hearing women's voices is really important, and it certainly has not been an easy road. I've experienced my own share of gender discrimination. I continue to do so on a regular basis. I think every woman in science has war stories that they could tell over a drink at the end of the day. But I think that we continue, first of all, because we are convinced that our voices are important as a gender, as half of the world.
Right.
And we also continue because we love what we do and because we think it's important. I do what I do because I love science. I love figuring out how things work. But I also do what I do because real people are being impacted by climate change today. And how could I live with myself if I didn't do what I could, what I am uniquely suited to help them?
Well, we thank you so much for coming on the show, and your voice is truly important, and everything you said is just remarkable and important for all of us to hear about what climate change is, the place of women, the issue of religion now. I mean, it's a big one. The Pope spoke, and various religious groups are addressing it, and the idea of climate denial in the US, which is huge, and it seems like you're doing a lot to combat that. And you have the show coming up on PBS, which I hope people will look out for, and you have several books, and we will put them on our screen for everyone to see. Can you tell us where people can find you, the website or location that people, if they want to go online and read more about you?
Absolutely. My website is my name, which is katherinehayhoe.com, Katharine, 2 A's. And I am on Facebook and Twitter. Those are the best places to find me.
Fantastic. So we thank Katherine Hayhoe, Dr. Katherine Hayhoe, an atmospheric scientist, a political scientist who works on climate change, also brings in issues of faith. And you can find this talk will be on, and our conversation will be on my website, HeidiHutner.com. And you can go there. There'll be all the links that she just mentioned will be on my website, so you can go and learn more about her work. And thank you so much, Katherine, for coming on today.